We do have a lot of things to get to. Friday night, I'm sitting there watching the end of the Mets, and then I see this Iglesias performance. Then they jump out to a big lead on Saturday. I'm like, they're going to the World Series. Like, I was convinced of that. Obviously, things went south after that, and the Yankees yesterday looked like the team that we saw earlier in the season. So the Mets looking like the team we saw earlier in the season in a bad way. The Yankees looking like the team we saw earlier in the season in a good way the last couple of days. That's why you can't get too high or too low, Boomer. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Jay. I'm doing great, actually. Great weekend for sure. But I do know that for the Mets, we all know what the problem is. It's no longer hitting. It's no longer scoring runs. It's preventing runs being scored. And Mark Vientos had the game on his bat last night in the bottom of the 10th and just couldn't come through with two men on. And, that's really what it comes down to. And then another gas can comes out of the bullpen and pours gas on the fire. They are a mess with their bullpen.
Yeah.
I think this Edwin Diaz thing really, hurt them, at least in these last two games against the Astros, in which they could have won because they are scoring enough runs. The Yankees, it's obvious, their situation. I mean, they get a split in Toronto. I guess they feel good about themselves, but, their problem is the bottom half of their lineup. When they are not going, the team is not going because, Soto and Judge can only do so. Volpe, Soto, and Judge can only do so much. So we know what the problems are. The real question is can David Stearns, can they weather this storm until Diaz comes back, I think, in a few days?
Well, also, they were longing for the days of Drew Smith being available, too.
Now he's done, too, yeah. So the point is they're bringing guys up, and it's now you know why guys are down in the minors. They just don't have what it takes. They're afraid to throw strikes, and when they do throw strikes, they get hit. There's no real rhyme or reason to what's going on with the Mets other than the fact that their bullpen – and starting pitching is, and if you're going to sit here and tell me that 80% of the game is pitching, well, that part of it is on full display right now, especially in these two losses against the Astros. Look, they now finish before the All-Star break with teams that are terrible. And the question is whether or not, they can come out of this with a significant, win total with the next, I think, 14 games to go.
Yeah, and it's amazing with the June that they had, and they played better baseball than just about everybody in Major League Baseball and turned the season around. They still come out of the month a game under 500, which just shows you when you bury yourself that badly early, how hard it is to really get back into the conversation. So they got back into the conversation, but going from a game under, a game over to where you need to be to really be a playoff team, which is, several games over. That's going to be the more difficult part, especially when you've got a bullpen in the way that they have a bullpen. So they were able to mask that with huge offense for a long time, but when you're missing Edwin Diaz, when Edwin Diaz is pitching and he's not so good, when you have other injuries in that bullpen, that's going to be the biggest thing. And oh, by the way, the Mets are one of 30 teams that have bullpen problems. Everybody's got a bullpen problem, and it ends up being the hardest thing to fix because there's only X amount of guys out there that everybody wants. So it's just hard. Generally, you're working with what you got and hope that these guys pitch out of their minds from here until the end of the season.
And you also got to hope that they continue to hit, especially now with these last 14 games. You go to Washington, you go to Pittsburgh, you come home to play Washington, and you come home to play Colorado.
Yeah.
This is the underbelly of the schedule. This is the part of the schedule where, if they're going to be a playoff team, these are the games, the majority of the games that they have to win.
I'm
not saying they're going to go 14-0, but, Give me a 9-5 run.
Stack some wins, man.
I'll take it. And then when you get to the All-Star break, maybe you're 4 or 5 games over 500, and then you make it a little bit more interesting for your general manager and your owner when it comes to where they are at and what they see here. So what's interesting to me is that we could have a John Tavares situation with Pete Alonso. We could have that situation where do they kind of go for it? Don't they go for it? Do they sign him? Don't they sign him? This is going to be a very, very interesting next 3 weeks.
I think that the most likely scenario as we sit here right now is that he's not traded, but he also doesn't re-sign at the end of the season.
Well, that would be
which stinks, but doesn't that make the most sense? Is you can't. So if the Mets are in the mix, I don't care what David Stern's plans were. You cannot trade away Pete Alonso
all right.
when they're chasing down a playoff spot. And then at the end of the year, I think Scott Boras is going to go out and get more money for Pete Alonso than the Mets want to pay him.
Especially when it comes to term.
Yeah.
The term is the key thing here because Pete's going to be 30 years old. But just to give you a perspective, so right now the NBA and the NHL are going into free agency. And guys are flying all over the place. Like Paul George signs this huge deal.
$212 million for 4 years with the 76ers.
Good,
fine.
Okay.
You can have him.
Good, you can have him.
Good luck.
I don't know how many games he's going to play, right?
Yeah.
So, but he is a great player. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that one of the next rivals just added an all-star player. Whether or not he is going to be what he was 5 years ago, 6 years, that's yet to be seen. But the point being is, let me just give you an example. And I'm not trying to drag hockey into anything, but it is a big day for hockey fans, for Devil fans, Islander fans, Ranger fans. Here's the thing about Chris Drury that I like, but I also caution. The cautionary tale is, okay, you're signing guys to contracts that have either no move clauses or no trade clauses. So one of those players happened to be Barclay Goodrow. And Barclay Goodrow was somewhat of a playoff hero this year. They brought him in from Tampa because he is a pedigree. He does have a couple Stanley Cups. He was supposed to be able to, bring this team together and be a difference maker. Now, you can argue whether or not he was or he wasn't because he does the little things other than scoring goals. And they probably felt like they were overpaying him. So you give him a no trade clause and you basically say to him, we want to trade you. And he goes, well, I have a no trade clause. I don't want that. So what does the GM do? The GM says, we're going to put him on waivers and we're going to have a deal with that San Jose. We'll take him.
Yeah.
And now he's got to go to San Jose and pay those goddamn California taxes. And he's all pissed off. And I would be pissed off if I were him too, because when I came here, I thought I signed a deal that said no trade clause, none of this, none of that. And then all of a sudden the GM decides to be ruthless, which I'm good with, but it also creates a problem with the reputation of who was making the decisions. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So this is where David Stern's lies. I mean, I think I want a general manager that's able to divorce himself and to do whatever is in the best interest of the team. But when you do things that are in the best interest of the team, sometimes you create a reputation within the body of the players. Like, I'm not going there. I can't trust them. I can't trust that if I sign this contract that this clause is going to mean anything because they'll find a way around the clause. Now, so part of me says I love the ruthless nature of that. And if Chris Drury were the player and it happened to him, I'm sure he would be pissed off. And now, they're talking about trading their captain, Jacob Trouba, and, maybe retaining some of the salary. Maybe he's going to go to Detroit because most players have to submit their 15 no-trade list team right now. So for David Stearns, who's here, he's got no relationship whatsoever with Pete Alonso before he got here. He's got no relationship with any of these guys that I know of before he got here. So the question is, when the time comes, you have to make the decision that you believe is in the best interest of your team that you are running, and not because you're friendly with the team or the fans want this guy or the fans want that guy. That really doesn't have anything to do with the decision making. It has to do with what is going to be the long-term best interest of your team.
Right, and I am fully on board with that statement. I just don't know how easy that's going to be, because if David Stearns is sitting there, let's just paint this hypothetical, where the Mets are 4 or 5 games over 500. They're obviously in the race. They have fought their way back. They've given their fans a season and a summer, so they're going to pay attention. The buildings will be more full, obviously, than they would have been if they were completely out of it. There's a good feeling around the team. The owner just even tweeted out before back-to-back losses. When I saw it, I was like, this is a minor touch the money spot. When I saw it after Friday night, there's something special going on here at Citi Field. Just stop. Just shut up, because of back-to-back games after that they lost. But anyway, so we get to this point. If David Stearns believes that trading Pete Alonso is the best thing for the future of the organization, and he's sitting there and the team is in a wild card spot, 4 or 5 games under 500, but he doesn't really believe that they're a contender this year and maybe they're overachieving, there is no way in hell he's pulling the trigger on that deal. And there's no way that Steve Cohen's going to let him pull the trigger on that deal, because at that point, you want to talk about a reputation, the Mets fan base would be outside with pitchforks if they did that. And this is a business. And I'm telling you, they are going to end up probably, in my estimation, getting the worst out of the Pete Alonso situation.
Well, why are you
because
saying that?
because this is I just explained it before. They're not going to trade him because they're going to be in the mix. And then they're not going to want to pay as much as Scott Boras is going to go get for him on the open market.
And then
that's the most likely scenario right now.
And then the Mets lose their first round playoff series or game, and then boom, it's done.
Right.
And then you're stuck. And,
I agree, but that's what's going to happen.
I mean, the easiest thing would be, Steve Cohen has all this money. We know how much money he's spending this year on players who are no longer here, so he's willing to spend the money. The question really comes down to, what does Pete Alonso look? Let's say Pete Alonso has 3 weeks in July that are going to be amazing. And let's say he's carrying the team, and let's say the team is well over 500 post All-Star break, and now all of a sudden we are rolling. You can't trade him. I'm with you. You can't trade him. There's no way. But the problem is that this pitching staff is such a mess and a disaster that, no matter how good he is offensively, they're going to cost them games. As we saw this past weekend, they lost 2 games that they should have won. Mm-hmm. And for different reasons, they lose. But, and I think Keith Hernandez was saying it, I think it was Saturday. He was saying, is this the manager's fault? No, it's not the manager's fault. The manager has nothing, and he's trying to figure out ways to get guys out. And it's amazing how with 6 outs left to go in a game, every pitcher sitting on, and you're like, come on, get a strike.
Yeah.
Stop throwing the ball into the dirt. Stop throwing wild pitches, pass balls.
I mean, these are borderline major leaguers, and that's being kind.
I mean, Diekman was like mind-numbing the other day.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, this is the dilemma that they're going to be in. Now, here's another part of this. We talked about this till we've been blue in the face, but, Juan Soto is out there as a free agent at the end of the year. If you're the Mets and you want to sign Juan Soto, you sign him both Pete Alonso and Juan Soto? You're going to go into that Steve Cohen, through-the-roof luxury tax?
I don't see that happening.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is, I don't know. I just... That's the long-term stuff. All I know is when I was watching the game on Friday. I know things have changed since Friday, but the prevailing thought was we were this close to having them not even be a thought, like Jerry skipping over them in the updates for 2.5 months straight. And they climbed their way back into the conversation and given the fan base something. And that right there is to be commended. Now, don't fall off a cliff, but I don't think that they will. I really believe that this stretch that you detailed before the All-Star break and what they have here in July is going to be really beneficial for them to build a little bit of a cushion going into the second half of the season.
I'll tell you one thing. In these 4, I think it's 14 games. I believe it's 14 games. If they go like 7-7 or they have a losing record through these 14 games, all of this conversation that we're having right now, out the window. They're totally out the window.
They'll still be right around 500.
Yeah, I know that, but what I'm saying is that this is the underbelly of the schedule. This is the easy part of the schedule, and I know playing within the division, things are a little bit different because you got the Nationals for 7 of the 14 games. But I mean, you have got to win every single one of these series. I'll take that. You want to lose one game a series, that's fine with me. And then you move on, and then maybe you give yourself a chance, and then you'll get Edwin Diaz back. Within the next week or whatever, and who knows what he's going to be like without the sticky stuff. He's going to be the guy, the previous guy without the sticky stuff, or the guy with the sticky stuff that got suspended and will get suspended again. And the thing about being suspended is that you end up shortchanging your team because you're one less pitcher in the bullpen. You cannot replace him.
That's right.
That's the part of the suspension and the penalty where you as a player are being uber selfish and you're causing your team dearly, as we have witnessed now the last 2 games.